Hello everyone. In this tutorial video, I'm going to explain to you the following XSD topics. Restrictions on a set of values. What is this for? This means that we can restrict the value of an element or the value of an attribute to particular set of values, such as, let's say in this case, 1, 2, or 3 only. So if we have an element called depth ID, we can have a value for that one, 1, 2, or 3 only. So set of values. Or if you don't like numeric values, you can have some string value like this, ITD, FD, or AD. This means that these are the only possible values we can assign for that particular element or value of an attribute. Also, restrictions on both the value of an element, and at the same time, it has also restrictions on its attribute value. Or if it has more than one attribute, we can restrict also those attributes of a particular element. Okay, these topics I think were not covered in my previous videos where I discussed the XSD, how to create XSD file, as well as this video here, attributes and restrictions in XML XSD file or the XSD file. Okay, so before you watch this video, I would like you to watch these two videos first so that you will have a better understanding on how to create an XSD file. Okay, so once again, these are the topics that we will cover in this video. But before that, please support this channel by clicking on the subscribe button and hit also the notification bell so that you will be notified with all the new videos that I'm going to upload in this channel. And so, let us discuss the following topics here. We will discuss first this restriction on set of values. Like I said, when we say set of values, we have values that we will assign to a particular element name, or an element, or simply we can also assign those values to an attribute. Alright, so let's say here we will only assign 1, 2, or 3. These are the only allowed value. Or this one here, ITD, FD, or AD only. So outside of these values will not be accepted by the XML. Alright, because those are the values that we will restrict in the XSD file. Alright, so we will apply this example here, this one here that we will create using this XML file here. Okay, so I already created an XML file here. So let's see here. I'm going to move it to the next. All right, here. I also created the XSD of this so that we are a bit fast in discussing it. Okay, so I already created some restrictions here. So we have here name, we have here address. Okay, so the name doesn't have a restriction. Okay, the value of the name doesn't have a restriction. However, the age attribute has restriction, and that is with the total digits of 3. Okay, so that's how it is. For the address, we have a restriction for this address, and that is to accept only capital letters. Okay, any number of capital letters. That's why we have asterisk here. All right. So currently, these are the restrictions that we have for our XML file. So if we try to validate it, let's validate it first. So far it is valid. Okay, so again, for our element name, it doesn't have any restriction, so I can put any characters here. Let's say number and special character will be added here. Let's see if this valid. It is still valid, so it's valid. So because we don't have restriction for the name. So again, with this topic here, let's include this into our XSD file. All right, so we will create one element and it's called depth ID, and the value will be 1, 2, or 3 only. So set of values. Outside of this 1, 2, or 3 values will not be considered valid. All right, so I'm going just to add that one right over here. Let's just add that one. We don't have it. Again, we should have like this here. I'm just going to copy this and let's put it somewhere here. All right, so there you go. Definitely, if we will validate this, we will have invalid XML because this is not yet defined in our XSD, because our depth ID is not yet defined in our XSD. So let us try to include that in our XSD. Let's have a restriction for that. So obviously we will put it after the address because depth ID is after the address. So I will just put it here, right? Now, to make it a little bit faster, I'm just going to, I think, copy this and paste it here. Okay, so it will be somewhere here, right? I'm just going to change this to depth ID. Okay, then followed by simple type, followed by restriction, and then followed by our restriction inside. This time we will not be using enumeration. We will be, pattern. We will be using enumeration. For a set of value, all right, if your problem is a set of value, okay, the values will be set of values. So you will be using enumeration in your XSD. Okay, so enumeration and then the value, and then the value you wish to assign. So as simple as this. So we have here 1, we have here 2, we have here 3. So our problem is to assign 1, 2, or 3 only. The values possible for this depth ID element will be 1, 2, or 3 only. So this is how it is. Okay, so depth ID here, simple type, restriction, and then you will just be using enumeration. So let's validate it. I'm going to go to my XML here. You make sure that, again, you have to click inside your XML. You go to your plugins this time and validate. And it's valid. Okay, because our values for the depth ID here is 1 and right over here is 3. Should we change it to 4, this one, our second record here, and it's not included here in our enumeration part here. It's not included in our set of values here. So when we save and when we validate, and we will have this error. So our data value is actually invalid because it's not included here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's 4. So to make it valid, you have to make sure that it is 1, 2, or 3. Okay, validate. So it's there. So in other words, you can assign set of values here. It's not only 1, 2, 3. It depends on the given problem. Okay. So you just have to put your set of values here. Let's see ITD, FD, or AD, because these are numeric values, no? So let's see. I'm going to say ITD. Let's say IT department. This is finance department, and then this is admin department, for instance. So definitely we will have an invalid XML here. When we validate now, we will have invalid data. Okay, that is because we have ITD, FD, or AD only. So you can change this to, let's say, AD. This is ITD, and let's see. Are these possible values? Yes, it is, or they are. So that's how enumeration works. So in this case, we implement enumeration in an element. It is also possible to implement this on an attribute value. It will be the same, just this time you have to put it in an attribute. So for instance, here we have an attribute here, all right, here. So your restriction will be here. Okay, so you will just put your restriction enumeration here. All right, so for attributes. So it's possible also in attributes. Just you have to mention those here inside the restriction of your attribute. All right, so that's how it is. So I hope you have, I hope you understand this particular topic here. Okay, so should you have a comment, just comment it down below, and I will be glad to answer your comments. The next topic will be here, restriction on the value of an element, and at the same time on the value of the attribute or attributes. All right. So for instance, here in our XML here, we can restrict this, and we can also restrict this. Like I said in my previous video, in those examples, or in the examples that I presented there, I just restricted either the value of an element or the value of an attribute, but not the same, but not both. Okay, so in this case, we will have restriction on both the value of an element as well as the value of an attribute. You can have many attributes if you wish to. You can restrict all of those. Okay, so for the sake of simple example, we will just have something like this, a simple one, at element value and attribute value. So we will have restrictions for both. So how do we do that? Now, we have to remember we already have restriction for the attribute age, and that is here. Okay, again, this is our element name, right? We already have a restriction for the age, but we don't have restriction for the element value, which is John Smith. Here, Juan de la Cruz. Okay, so since we want both to have restriction, what we need here is extension on restriction. Okay, so we will extend. Okay, because we have two different type of value here. One is element value, the other one is attribute value. So we need to extend our restriction. So for extension, what we do is we will just simply place our restriction in another place. And where is that place? It will be here. It can be here. Okay, just before our root element, contact info. Remember, our root element is contact info here. So we can place all our restrictions here. The definition of our restrictions will be here, or it can be also here. Okay, just before the end of our root schema, root element schema. Okay, so just before here. So in this case, it is line 50. So you can place all your restrictions here, definition of all your restrictions here. Okay, now to make it more simple, because our element is right almost at the top, so I will just be placing it here. Okay, so, and because we have already our age here, what I will do is I will just transfer some of the codes here. Okay, but in reality, you will be doing this, you will start from the beginning, right? So for instance, you have restriction for the age, so you will be doing it from the beginning. But in this case, we already have it, so I will just transfer it here, right? So it will be like that. Okay, so we will start from the simple type. Always start from the simple type. We already have it here. I will just transfer it there. So there you go. And I will just be putting it here. Line number 4, right? So place it there. Okay. So I will just be arranging it. All right. So again, I just move it from here in line 22, all of this. I just place those here. Okay. So again, if you are doing it from the scratch, so you will be typing simple type first here. Okay, your restriction, total digits. So your restriction inside. And then here, when we go back here, okay, so you don't need this anymore. This one here. Okay, we will actually be needing this. Okay, so it's up to you where you want to start. It's either from here or here, right? So anyway, we already have it here. So the next thing that you will do is to assign the name for your restriction. So let's say we will assign the name. No? So let's call it as age restriction. There you go. So this is the name for the age restriction. So whenever we want to apply the age restriction, which is up to 3 digits only, you can assign only up to 3 digits or numbers, then we will call this name age restriction. It's up to you whatever name you would like to place here. Okay, so this is something like a variable. All right. Now, let's go back here in our element name here. So what we do here is we will have to adjust it also. So right after the complex type, I will remove this one first so that you will have a better understanding. So we have element here, complex type. This is what we do normally, right? So after this one, element complex type, what we do is we need the element simple content. There you go. All right, so there you go. And you just have to put the ending element simple content. Okay, next is we need the extension. This is what I'm saying. If you are going to have restriction for the element value and at the same time the attributes, it has an attribute or attributes. So you will also restrict those attributes. So we need to extend. Okay, so we will be using here now the extension element. So extension element, and we will be putting here, or I mean we will be using the attribute base is equal to, there you go. All right, so put down the ending element. Okay, so what are you going to put here in the base? Okay, so in the meantime, let's just make it a little, let's empty it first. We will leave it first like this, but we'll go back here, right? So inside your base, that will be your attribute element. So because you have attribute, so you will have something like this, attribute name. All right, so it is called age. All right, that's the name, right? That's the name of our attribute here, age here. And then we will apply also again type. All right, so before we put here the type of the age, like for example, if it is integer, normally this is integer, so we will be putting integer here, right? So we will be saying integer here. All right. So, but that is not what we will put here. What we will put here is our restriction that we assigned here. All right. I mean that we created here. So again, I'm just going to arrange this in such a way. All right. So instead of type, we will be typing here the restriction that we created. No. So again, I just save it, so it went like that. So anyway, so we have here age restriction. So meaning to say we are going to apply the restriction that we created here. All right. So that's how it is. Okay, now I still have some mistake. So there you go. I forgot my slash here. All right. So I will not be using ending attribute element. All right, here I will not be using the ending attribute. So I will be using slash right here. So it's considered empty element, right? Attribute, and then you have two, okay, attribute, name and type. Okay, so I'm going to save now. So let's see if it is going to work. Okay, so again, our restriction is right over here now. Okay, so let's try to validate it. Oops, line 21. Okay, this is what I'm saying. Okay, we have a mistake here again. Let us see that mistake. There you go. The base. We did not assign the base here. All right. The base value for the element name. Okay, so we cannot do that. Okay, so let's see now. Let's have another restriction. Oh, by the way, in this base here, again, just like the type here. So here, the value for the base here will be the restriction for your name, and that is not, and then that is what we don't have right now. Okay, that is the error now here. But as far as the age is concerned, this is it only, and it will going to work. No, okay. So again, if you don't have yet the restriction for the name, you can just simply say here the data type. So you can say here string. There you go. So what we did, no restriction here, but there is restriction in the age. Okay. So when we validate now, all right, so that's it. Okay. So we have solved now this base value here. All right. However, this is not what we want. What we want is that there will be restriction also for the name, and that is, let's say our restriction will be, we will allow capital letters and small letters and any number of characters, including space. So that is our restriction. So we will allow space, we will allow small letter or letters, and then we will allow also capital letters, but not number and special character. So we will not allow those. Okay, so this time we will remove this AA string here. All right, because we will have restriction for our name now. Okay, so but before I remove this, I will create first the restriction. And so let us see. Again, our restriction for the name will be all capital letters. Okay, it will accept capital letters, small letters, and a space. Only those three characters, right? So in this case, I'm just going to copy the restriction for the address because it's something like the same with those restrictions that I have mentioned. So again, we will start from the simple type. Okay, so there you go. I'm just going to copy this and I will just paste those here. Okay, again, you will start from the simple type. Okay, you will type simple type and then you will type the ending simple type. After the simple type, restriction, and then you will type the ending restriction. Okay, inside the restriction, that will be your restriction. In this case, we will be using the pattern. Okay, so So we will be accepting capital letters and then small letters from A to Z and the space. And we will be using asterisk. Okay, that's the reason why I copied it, so that we will not be typing it again. Okay, so I'm going to save it now. All right, that's it. It is now saved. Now, let us apply this restriction here. So before we can apply it, we have to assign a name, just like what we did in the age restriction. So there you go. So let's call it name restriction. Okay, so your restriction will be here. Now, all we need to do is to apply it here. Instead of the string data type here, right, here in our name. Remember, this is our name element, right? So for this one, for the extension base, this is for the element, okay? Because inside will be the attributes, right? So here will be the element. So I'm just going to say here, name restriction. There you go. So what we did is, again, we restricted the value of an element name, and we restricted at the same time the value of an attribute. Okay, so this time let us see if it is valid. So plugins. Okay, it is valid. All right, let's put some invalid characters here. Let's say 1 here. Will it be valid? Let's see. So it's not, because we have 1 here. According to our restriction for the name, we have here letters only, capital or small or space, and it can be any number of characters. Okay, that is our restriction for the name right now. Okay, so definitely it will not be accepted. So I'm just going to remove the 1, and this one should be valid now. Once again, and it's valid. So that's how you restrict the value of an element, and at the same time there is restriction on the attribute or set of attributes, values of the attributes or value of an attribute, okay, if you only have 1. Okay, so it's just the same, just that in my previous discussion, it will just be the same, just that you have to use extension here. And at the same time, the restrictions will be placed either here at the beginning, okay, before the definition of the root element of our XML. Okay, you can place, okay, those here, or you can place those here, okay, just before the ending or after the ending of the root element. Okay, so you can place those here, so just before the end of the root schema element. So it will be the same. I'm going to save here. I'm going to save as well the XML, validate again, and it will work. All right, so it's going to be like this. Now I just place those at the top so that it will be easy for me to see our code, because name is something like at the top, so it will be easy for me if I put those here. All right, so as simple as that. Okay, now again, I'm going to emphasize, maybe you will have an element wherein only the element value is restricted, but not the attribute values, or vice versa. Only the attribute value is restricted, and the value of an element is not restricted. So let's see first the value of an element. If you don't have an attribute, if you don't have a restriction for the name or for the value of the name element, so in the base, you will just say, or you will just put here the data type. So as simple as that. Okay, so here there is no restriction on the element value, but there is restriction on the age. Okay, so it's going to be like this. So when you validate now, well, of course it will be valid. So this time, because there is no restriction, you can put number, special characters, or character, and it will still be valid because there is no restriction. All right. Now, let's change the setting now. We will have restriction for the name. Okay. But we don't have restriction for the attribute, age. So the same. In the type, this time you will be placing here the data type. So like this. So this is more better with the one we have discussed, no? So let's see now here. I'm going to validate. There you go. Still valid. Okay. So here we can assign now any number of numbers. Okay. So 20,000. So we are not restricted anymore. So validate here. So it's valid because our restriction is simply just to put a number there. So any number. All right. And again, should you change your mind and you want now element value with restriction and attribute value for the name element with restriction as well. So you just have to define, or you just have to place now your restriction here. So in this case, we have age restriction. There you go. And that is the definition of our age restriction here. There you go. All right, so I'm going to save now. Here, when we validate, it should be invalid now because, why? Because our age here is 20,000. All right, it should be up to 3 numbers only. So if we say 20 or 200, that will be valid now. There you go. It's valid. All right, so that's how it is. Okay, so another nice thing about this is that we can copy. No? We can copy and we can apply. No? We can apply existing restriction to any element where that element will have the same restriction. Okay, so in short, we can apply the existing restrictions to an existing element. Okay, so for instance, let's apply the same restriction for our age to another element. That is possible, no? So you don't need to create another restriction because they are just the same. So we will just be using the same restriction. So for instance, let us assume that these records are the records for our salesmen, and our salesmen are selling something. No? So let's say we have here quantity sold, right? So we are selling something, so we will put here the quantity they sold. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this. Let us add this one here. So for instance, this salesman, John Smith, sold, let's say, 100 items. Okay, and for this one here, let us add here quantity sold here. So this time we will be having, let's say, 10. So we will apply the same restriction that we have for our age. Again, the restriction of our age is it should have 3 numbers. Whatever numbers those numbers are, what is important, they are 3. Any 3 numbers, any combination of 3 numbers. All right, so here. So we will apply that also for quantity sold. Okay, you can copy this if you wish to, and you will have another restriction for that. Okay, so you can just copy this and you will say here quantity restriction, QTY restriction. So it's the same, right? But to save some space, because like I said, you can copy or you can apply the same restriction to a particular element or particular attribute. No, remember, attribute also is allowed. So what we do is the same thing. We don't need to copy it. What we need is just to apply it. Okay, so again, we don't have yet the quantity sold, and it's right after the department ID, so I will be putting it here, right? It will be here. Okay, so I think I will just be copying our value here. Okay, so this is how I do it now. I think I will just copy the address here. Okay, so I'll be placing it here. Okay, so this one here will be for the quantity sold. All right, and then after that, what we should have, we should have so here we should have here. I'm just going to copy this. Okay, I'm just going to copy all this. Okay, again, complex type and then simple content. I'm just going to copy this. So you just have to make sure that you have like that. There you go. All right. You don't need any more the simple type. You don't need any more the simple type here. Okay, so what you need is simple content, and it will be here. There you go. Slash simple content, and you need also the complex type. Okay, so it will be somewhere here. Okay, so here you go. Okay, so again, I just did it like this. So you have to have your element, complex type, and simple content. So again, it's just the same with what you have somewhere here. Let's say, let's use the address here. Okay, so this is the best that you can copy, right? So this one here, you will not copy this one because this is for attribute. It doesn't have attribute here, quantity sold, right? So there you go. So it will just be the same like this. So the next is we will apply now the restriction. I mean, sorry, the extension. No? So I'll just be copying the extension here, and I will just be putting it here. There you go, right? Okay, so it doesn't have an attribute, so there is no data here. And so in the middle, there will be nothing here because there is no attribute. Remember, if there is attribute, you will be placing those attribute values here in line 56, right? But there is no attribute for quantity sold. So it will be something like this. Now, let me correct some here. I think I forgot my slash here. Let's check. Okay, so I think, okay, now everything is, I think, okay. So let's try and see. Oops, expected here. Here, extension, base, simple content. Oh, this one here. Okay, so I'm just going to remove this. Sorry about that. There you go. So it will be like this, as you can see. So again, element, complex type, this time simple content, and then extension. Okay, so, and then we will just be applying the same restriction we applied for the age for the quantity sold. So when we go now to our element, I mean XML, validate, and it's valid. Okay, so meaning to say, it will only accept 4 numbers here. Sorry, 3 numbers. All right, so if we have 4 here, then this is invalid. There you go. So because it should only be accepting any 3 numbers. So let's validate again. There you go, it's valid. So that is the nice thing about this. So you don't need to create another one because they are just the same. All you need to do is to use the name of that restriction. All right, so as you can see right over here. There you go. That's how you just place it. Okay, so I hope that is very clear for you or to you. It's only simple. You just have to place all your restrictions here. All right, or your restrictions will be somewhere here. Again, you only do this if you would like to extend restrictions for elements. Okay, when we say extension or extend, that means there is restriction for element value, and at the same time there will be restriction to the attribute values. So that's how we just do it here. All right, so once again, if you have comment or if you have question, you may place your comment in our comment section below, and please share this video to your friends. If you like this video, also hit the like button, and well, I guess that's it for this video. Okay, so all these topics were discussed in this video. Okay, so thank you very much for watching, and see you again on my next video.